We will begin with the opening prayers.
Dedang dengi duma tamji payong singi shilin chungsin Tongme meba kongbe pichong tebe paru sendir sohand Sende chanjuru yinbe webe su si samin brai nini radote Chelo seba chebe namdaraji Kumi chenpa dendir sovande Chambe loji niji dongshu Tang trawa meba engi jona braka Tongme gyudan jela da gyushi Meda ngebra sendir sovande Nyemo ngelo geji medon shi Kati shaya nipu chelenchi Kewe nganzu sambo mi tongwe Shinyin penzi kandri sohan So son ra jena nyamsha Ne changi so sura jebe shiraki Shiro jesu jubra mi sheba Nye jin tambra jete sohan Chimbro chala zishi jishi Loi me nama daba nam ye sanjirane Gela jove lo dregi vede Nyonsong ora zede sohan Tedra yende jele Chashi jube lusun tende Bagama baye gomba zonji sho Hu sangye jedang soye sho nama lo chancho bando dane yesus Tage junye gibe sanama ye rola benzi Sangye rupra sho sangye jedang soye sho naman chancho bado dane yesus Dagi jenye gibe sanama ye rola benzi Sangye rupra sho sangye jedang soye sho naman chancho bado dane yesus Dagi jenye gibe sanama ye rola ben Sangye rupra sho chanse wadan cheche shaba Jeso ye ran gushin sewa Kewa jose dagi jesa ba tamche dam chanchu jemo Sashi bücü joshi medo Rejave neshi ninde gemban Sangye shindo mede buwai Droge nanda jinla jebra jo Simje namye samba Loye jera jeda Shizhon de monde bayi chege bolo bolo so. 송이 여자기 여자다 명호서고 선배배 맞서게 막 보험적이 되잖아. 니좀 보게 저거 해도 쓰봐서 나라면 야외도 교샤기에서 샤기에 뭐지 링검사배 미르담배서 미람 예로를 좀 하죠. 대제구신 저거든 자고. 고생하면 이거 잘안돼. 시작하라 hier 영어로 genzebe 넌도 전에 본 개회대 먹으면서 봐. 그 이런 뭐절로 어디 도저저를 근소 남아가마 봐. 영어로 그냥 전에 집에 좀 이동네 뭐 칠레고 이제 제대로 언제 집에 저런 나. 내저지 근데 라메 도지 경어라 저 반대자 남아를 보세 나긴 저를 배면 되죠라. 그래 집에 관해 저도 되고 저도 영어로 자도 시제에 주는 남들도 서로 오늘은 대주제라는 거를 미겨도지 샤올라 장자노 원하소다 도말 아주지 고마하게
First of
러주게시
all, I'd like to wish all of the teachers at the various monasteries, the lamas, the tulkus, and the teachers, the students from the shedras, and particularly the nuns in the nunneries, and all of my Dharma friends, male and female, who are watching over webcam. I would like to wish you all my warm greetings. Now today, yesterday we were speaking about the topic of meat that is pure in the three ways, whether it is appropriate to eat meat or not. And I discussed the question of meat that is pure in the three ways yesterday. So I thought I should continue and finish the topic this morning, or today. You know, the Bhagavan Buddha taught his monastic students that their food shouldn't be too luxurious, that they should instead live of alms. And so he made rules that they should do this. Now, when you go for alms, there is also, when you go for alms, there's the danger that some faithful sponsors will kill animals for the sake of the And so, because of that danger, then it is important that you eat the food that is pure, the meat that is pure in the three ways. So this is the rule that the Buddha made. And when he made this rule, then in Indian society at the time, the talk that happened was that, people said that the Buddha had allowed his monastic students eat meat. There was no real discussion in the society that the Buddha had allowed his students to eat meat. Not that they had allowed to eat meat that's pure in the three ways. They said that he had allowed that his students to eat meat. And so because of this, at that time, those who particularly were attached to vegetarianism, such as the Jains and other non-Buddhists, began to criticize the Buddhists, primarily for the reason that they said that the Buddha allowed his monastic students to eat meat. Now, it wasn't just the non-Buddhists, even among the Buddhists' own students. there were people who disputed with him the idea that students were allowed to eat meat that is pure in the three ways. Now, the main person making this dispute was Devadatta.
가르쳐 그건 중국어로 시험입니다. 아니 레진사 중국어로
Now, if we talk about Devadatta's origins or his background story, Devadatta was the son of the Buddha's uncle Amritodana. Amritodana is the Buddha's uncle, Devadatta was the son. Now, there are other explanations in other sources, but in any case, he was a cousin of the Buddha. He was the son of the Buddha's uncle. And so the Devadatta first entered the community of Buddhist monastics and became a monk, but later he had a discordant way of seeing things. And he felt competitive to the Buddha, and so he separated from the Sangha and established his own separate monastic community and philosophical school. Later, Devadatta his own philosophical schools. Later he perished, and some say that he was carried away in a flood. Some say that the ground split open and he fell into the house. But in any case, he passed away. Still, even after he died, his followers continued and upheld his tradition. And the way we know this is that in the 4th and 5th century, the Chinese monk Fa Xian went to India. And then in India, Tang Xuanzang went to China, or went to India. And during the tradition, Datta's followers was still there. What they wrote in the notes of their travels, they wrote that Devadatta's tradition went for after the three Buddhas of the past. So this would be Kanakamuni, Kashyapa, and so forth, but not to Shakyamuni. And so that tradition was still present up to the 8th century. Now, while the Buddha was still on this world, the Devadatta caused what is called a schism in the wheel of the Sangha. Now, schism in the wheel of the Sangha means that the Buddha's monastics split into two factions. And he also drew blood from the Buddha's body with a malicious intention. This means that he was actually trying to murder the Buddha. He's thinking that he should kill or murder the Buddha, and did many different things to try to do this. And for that reason, he had accumulated the heinous acts. The very strong acts. These are the worst acts, the karma of the heinous acts. It's similar to killing your father or killing your mother. And so for this reason, according to the scriptures, the foundation vehicle, it said that as soon as Devadatta died, he was reborn in hell. But according to the Mahayana Avatamsaka Sutra and so forth, there's a prophecy that Devadatta will awaken to Buddhahood in the future. In some other Mahayana sutras, it says that in order to show the Buddha's greatness, he took the form of a competitor of the Buddhas. And likewise, and also, he was just an emanation who came in order to demonstrate to sentient beings how they would be reborn in hell if they committed the heinous acts. So there's this explanation of Devadatta and all. But in any case, whether he was born in hell or later, or whatever happened to him, no, right now. It's difficult for us to know. However, but in any case, what Devadatta did actually was that he said that first, he said that they should keep 5 additional precepts, 5 additional austerities. He's made the suggestion to the Buddha. He suggested the 5 additional precepts or the 5 precepts. Now, these 5 precepts, now one of these included not eating meat at all. He said that you shouldn't eat meat at all. and that those who follow him should not eat meat, and then basically keep these 5 austerities or these 5 precepts. I mean, he made this suggestion, but the Buddha did not accept it. And so for that reason, the Buddha's the monastic students then turned into it became 2 factions. Now, actually, the majority of them followed Devadatta. So a few stayed with the Buddha, but most of them followed Devadatta. Now, what are these 5 austerities? Now, there are different. When we ask what the 5 austerities were, there are different assertions about them in the Vinaya scriptures of the different schools. But today, instead of speaking about all of those, so these are described very clearly in the 50 verses in the Vinaya and so forth, in other texts, so in the Tibetan tradition, and in the great commentaries on the Vinaya. So if you read these, you will know, so I don't need to speak about them now. However, there are different ways that the 5 austerities are listed, but they're all the same, and including vegetarianism. So if you look at it from one perspective, then, during the time when the Buddha was on earth, what the Buddha said to his monastic followers is that they should not eat any meat at all, but they should only eat meat that was pure in the 3 ways. So this is the rule the Buddha made. But Devadatta said that it shouldn't be eaten at all, and they should practice pure vegetarianism. And so that was his suggestion. Not only did he make the suggestion, he also made that very rule for the monastics who followed him. So for this reason, Tolten Barwa, the blazing intellectual, said that, and later masters also said, if you're following the foundation vehicle, you must eat some meat, because if you do not, then if you do not accept meat, then you are then there's the danger that you'll be following the become the austerities of Devadatta. And so for that reason, and so this is one of the main reasons cited by those who wanted to prove that monastic should be allowed to eat meat, or that they should eat it. The reason is that the Buddha said that we should eat meat that is pure in the 3 ways, because the Buddha taught we should do this. If we do not, and if we say that we're not going to eat meat at all, then this is like the action of Devadatta. It's like the austerity of Devadatta. So there are people who say this nowadays.
자, 당연히 쉬야 제레샤 가서 수수타변 도에 계신데 뭐 꿀리 뒤봐. 반복업 집어서 하디.
Now, something I forgot to mention of it.
알파벳 지메신이
The text I forgot was a text by Amalamitra on the Vinaya. Now, there's something we need to examine here. If we look at the Great Exposition, I will show you the citation now. Now, where did it go?
다 제라시에 주시면 알아롱들이죠. 제라시에 주시면 써야 돼.
So this is the quotation from the Great Exposition. Now, the Great Exposition is is one of the root texts of our philosophical schools. When we speak about the four different philosophical schools, there's the Great Exposition and the Sutra School, and the basic text of the Great Exposition School is this Great Exposition. And what it says is that as it says, now I don't need to read all of these. So basically, it says that among the Buddha's disciples, Mahakashyapa was the one who had the greatest contentment and the greatest trainment. And the one who was the most careful about food and the strongest in conduct was Bakula. Now, the difference between the two of these two is that Mahakashyapa would eat whatever alms, no matter whether it was good or bad. He would not choose it. If it was good, he would eat it. If it was bad, he would eat it. But Bakula, when he received better foods, he would give up the bad food. But eat the worse foods. No, so Mahakashyapa ate whatever was offered him, good or bad, and Bakula only ate the worst foods. And what is the worst for that? Now later, the great venerable masters of the Great Exposition described this in different ways. Now, some of the people said that the reason why Mahakashyapa didn't eat the better foods or Bakula didn't eat the better foods is that the better food would include foods such as meat, the more elaborate preparations, the more luxurious preparations that would include meat. And if you have meat, then this will include a lot of meat. You have to cut sentient beings' throats and cut their meat off. And so that food would be made from the flesh and blood of many animals. And so from compassion, he wouldn't eat these better alms offerings. Now, some people say that if he ate the better food, he would have many faults that appeared to him, so he didn't eat these better foods. So now there's a question here, and the question is, if Bakula gave up the better foods and only ate the worse, then when he was going on alms, did he just not accept the better foods, or did he accept them and then throw them out later? And so the question is, if he didn't take it at first, then that wouldn't be out, because the Buddha said that when you may not make choices when you go on the alms round. Because people going on alms round don't have the power to choose whether they're going to the better or the worse food. Now, once you have accepted the food, if you throw it away, then there is the danger of wasting the offering that the donor gave you. You're wasting that offering. And so what did Bakula do? If he only ate the worse alms and not the better, then how is it that he did it? Did he not accept it at first, or after he got it? Was that he first didn't accept it all, but when you say he didn't accept it at first, then doesn't he have the fault of making a choice when he's going on the alms round? He does not have that fault, and that reason is that Bakula had the divine eye. He had clairvoyance. Because he had clairvoyance, when he went on the alms round, he would look with his clairvoyance and to see who had the worst alms. And when he knew who had the worst alms, he would go to them and ask for the alms. For that reason, he didn't have that fault. And so for that reason, the elder Bakula only ate the worse alms, not the better alms, such as meat. Likewise, it also says in the in the Angulimala Sutra, it says that Mahakashyapa dwelled within the 12 qualities of training and also had a pure vegetarian practice. So he also did not eat meat. And so when we look at these different quotes, what we can understand is that during the time of the Buddha, there were also many monastic students who did not eat meat and who ate vegetarian. We can also use our logic and see that the monastics from Brahmin families had for generations not meat, and so they were used to it. And so for them, it's like they were unable to eat meat. It's quite possible that there are people like that we can guess or infer. And so for those who'd eat, and it was and I think that the Buddha did not make a rule that the people who were uncomfortable eating meat had to eat meat. So think about, so I think we can see from this that merely because of not eating meat and that is pure in the three ways, or not eating meat at all, does not necessarily mean that one is in Devadatta's camp. Now, what is the reason why saying that that not eating meat was through his Devadatta's position? He made this rule not primarily because of conduct, but because of his motivation. Now, the reason that we said it's because of his motivation is that, as I said before, Devadatta was a relative of the Buddha, and he thought to himself he was the same. He thought he had pride of thinking he was the same. And he was also really competitive towards the Buddha. And because he was so competitive to the Buddha, for this reason, when the Buddha he disputed the Buddha's rules of the Buddha eating the meat that's pure in the three ways, and he had thought that he should make an even stricter rule than that. And so he made this out of these strict rules out of his pride and out of his competitiveness. Did he make these rules out of compassion for animals? It's difficult to say that. It's primarily out of his competitiveness for the Buddha. And he said the Buddha said that the Buddha is allowing you to eat meat, but I'm not going to allow you to harm sentient beings. If I make a rule like that, then that's a better rule. That's a better in society. It'll look better. People will consider that better. And so for that reason, he made that rule. And people would see it in this way, he thought. So Devadatta's motivation for giving up meat was mistaken. It was competitiveness towards the Buddha. It was in order to bring the Buddha down. That is why he made that rule. It is not a rule that he made out of a pure motivation and compassion. I think it's fair to explain it like this. Now, basically, when we think about the original Buddhism, and then during the time when the 18 schools spread, then overall in Buddha, this is the primarily time when the most Buddhists said that you should only eat the Mahayana Dharma. And from the time that it began to spread, and especially the time that the sutras such as the Great Pure Nirvana Sutra, the Travels of Lanka Sutra, the Sutra of Benefiting Angulimala, the Noble Cloud of Jewels Sutra, the Elephant Strength Sutra, and the Great Kucha Sutra, and in particular the Essence Sutras, the sutras that teach the Buddha nature, teach that even eating meat that is pure in the three ways is inappropriate, and so this teaching became even more prevalent. And so basically the teachings of practicing vegetarian and giving up meat became very, very strong, very prevalent. And so for that reason, most of the Mahayana sutras that prohibit meat are predominantly sutras of the third turning wheel of the Dharma, what we call essence sutras, sutras that teach the Buddha nature. Now, there are many reasons why they say this. Of course, there are many different reasons, but the main reason, if we think about it, if we think about it as in the Mahayana, it is said that we should think of all sentient beings as if they were our parents. And if you really think from your heart that your father and mother, now this is not just sort of, mouthing, but if you really feel it from your heart. So from the depths of your heart, if you think from your mind that they are your father and your mother, it would be really hard to say that you're able to eat their flesh. Likewise, if we were to eat sentient beings' flesh, then this would corrupt our minds, or it would stain our minds. Our minds would become more hardened, and it would eventually become less loving kindness and compassion. It would become very, very stiff or a hard person being, and so this is a difficult issue, a difficult problem, serious issue that we should avoid. In particular, in the Essence Sutras, it is taught that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. And I think that for this reason, because this is taught, it's taught that it is taught that one shouldn't eat the flesh of a being who has Buddha nature. But here today, if I don't need to read each of the citations from the Mahayana Sutras. Now, if you wish to read them yourself, you can read the sutras, the Great Mahaparivarana Sutra, the Travels Langa Sutra, the Sutra of Benefiting Angulimala, and so forth. I don't need to read them all now. In particular, in Chinese, there is a sutra called not eating flesh out of the omniscient sage not eating meat out of compassion means that during the time of Maitreya, then out of compassion, you primarily emphasize compassion, and so for that reason, if you in that time, during the time of Maitreya, if the monastics eat meat, they will incur defeat and lose their vows. So this is a prophecy that the Buddha made, it is said. Now, I think there's something really important to understand here, because if you think about it from one perspective, in the Mahayana, most of the sutras that prohibit eating meat are in the last sutra turning of the wheel of Dharma. And Maitreya is the one who teaches the Buddha nature, or in Tibetan we'd say the Shentong. But I think if we talk about, I think it's better to say one who teaches the Buddha nature, because it's better, because you say, then when you say Shentong and Rantong, then you're creating a dispute. When you say people who are teaching Buddha nature, I think there's less room for dispute. So frankly, those the proponents of Buddha nature is the one who wrote who wrote the treatises that teach taught the Buddha nature most clearly, particularly the Ratnagota Vibhaga, or the Sublime Continuum. And so for these reasons, I think they're a good reason for why they're saying this. And so I thought I should explain these reasons to you today. Now, if we look at the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, what it says is, the rule allowing meat that is pure in the three ways was actually made in order to prohibit meats in stages. Prohibit meat in stages, not instead of doing it immediately. So it was not a rule that is saying that one should eat meat. And they said that after that it passed into nirvana, that even eating meat that was pure in the three ways. Now, when we look at this, whether actually there are people who practiced this or not in historical fact, I don't know. It's difficult to say that. However, eh, among the Foundation Day schools that we have today, that if we say to them that the Great Nirvana Sutra said this, and that and we recited this citation saying that you shouldn't practice that you shouldn't eat meat after the Buddha passed into nirvana, they wouldn't accept it. And the reason they wouldn't accept it is because of the Mahayana Sutra. And since they don't accept the Mahayana Sutra, so they would not accept the citation. And so for this reason, Gendo Drup wrote in his had question as an answer with Chandat Namniga Jatsang, who was a king actually in Tibet. He was actually very learned in astrology, the astrology of Kala Chakra in particular. It said an emanation of the Rigton king Pema Karpo, or White Lotus. And so they had so Gendo Drup had recorded his question and answers with him. And what they record is that in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, that the monastics would not be allowed to eat meat after the Buddha's path into nirvana was said was primarily intended for Mahayana monastics. Now, at that time, one doubt we might have that is at this time is that in the Mahayana it says that meat is prohibited out of compassion. And so if we think about this, then some people might think, people say, if you have if you're going to make a cup of rice, there's also going to be wrong to eating a cup of rice, because in order to create a cup of rice, when you are farming it, you kill a lot of insects, and you kill many insects in order to raise it, and so it harms sentient beings. And so for that reason, you wouldn't even be able to eat meat, they say. So there are many people who say this also. Now, this doubt, this is not a new doubt, actually. This sutra also appears in the sutras of the Buddha. For example, what it says in the Angulimala Sutra. That's what it says. Manjushri explained it. So it's not allowed to plow fields. No, I don't need to read it all, but there are many different things. Many people say that you are not allowed to eat meat because it harms sentient beings. So then the Buddha. Well, then you shouldn't be allowed to plow either, right? And you shouldn't be able to make Buddha use water to make food because it would harm sentient beings. And at that time, the Buddha said that this is a worldly way of thinking. Because if you are someone of the lay preceptors, then the food and drink are something that lay people need to produce, and lay people need to engage in farming. And so in other words, if you're going to have Buddhas, you have to have people who are farming. There are living beings in the ground, the living being in the water, there's living being in the air. And so if you have a really narrow way of thinking about it, no matter what you do, there would be no way that you wouldn't be committing misdeeds. And so this is so there'd be no way we could be pure, and there'd be no way that you should ask about this in society. And in particular, the one thing we need to think about is that for the sake of meat, we're specifically killing sentient beings. When you're plowing, then the insects are killed on the side. It's not that they intentionally kill them. then what you're intending to do is to plow the fields. Now, of course, as you do this, will also kill insects, but it's not what you're particularly intending to do. You're particularly intending to uh, kill the. You're not intending to kill the animal. So you have to understand the difference between killing sentient beings and the fault of taking a sentient being's life. Even when we're like walking back and forth or going to different places, we kill many insects. If you think about it in that way, then there'd be nothing at all that you'd be allowed to do. You wouldn't be able to do anything. And so for that reason, you'd just be thinking too narrowly. It doesn't really help you understand to decide the actual nature. It's just raising a doubt, but it's not actually, in fact, it's not something you can actually put into practice. Some of our doubts are actually just prevent people from moving forward. They don't show you any way that you can move and move forward. And if they don't show you any way you can move forward, then I don't think there's any benefit to them. So in brief, in the Mahayana, they emphasize the practice of loving kindness and compassion for sentient beings. And in the Mahayana Sutras, eating meat is prohibited. And so for that reason, most of the monastics in countries where the Mahayana spread eventually became vegetarians and stopped eating meat. For example, if you think about it in terms of China, to give that is the clearest example of this. Within China, the vegetarianism, practice of vegetarian began about years after Buddhism had spread to China. Before that, monastics would be allowed to practice vegetarian at will. They didn't necessarily have to give up meat. But after that, there was a great movement to give up meat. And the person who's leading this movement was the Emperor Wu of Liang during the Southern Zhang dynasty. So he was in the 6th century. He was born in 502 and passed away in 549. He had very great faith in Buddhism. He was a great patron of Buddhism and had great faith in Buddhism. He himself actually went forth as a monastic 3 times. He would go in. He would go forth, become a monastic, and wear the robes, and then people would come and say, "Oh, please come back and be our emperor." And then he'd do this over again. So he spent a lot of time reading the Buddhist scriptures. And when he was reading the Mahayana Sutras, he saw many of the statements that it is that out of love and compassion, it is important not to eat meat. And so this influenced him greatly. And so for that reason, up to this time, there were particularly for the animal, for the emperors. And so he made a prohibition to meat sacrifices in the ancestral temples. There are also animal products, and he made a rule that that those medicines may not be made out of animal products. And so he provided a good example of pure example. And he also used the strict rules of the nation, and using the sutras, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, the Travasalanga Sutra, and the Angulimala Sutra, as a basis for creating for writing a letters talking about giving up meat. And so in this, I think he shared his opinion that monastics should not eat meat. It's not just that he shared his opinions. he also specifically invited 198 male and female monastics to come to the palace and to discuss the issue of whether eating meat was appropriate. And so there's a great conference to discuss whether in the Mahayana it was appropriate to stop eating meat. And so because this happened at that time, he'd read so many uh, he had prepared over 50 questions with his great intelligence, and he used these to ask the upholders of the Vinaya about to give answers to them. And so basically, when we say he emphasized the Mahayana sutras that say that prohibit eating meat out of love and compassion. And so for that reason, this movement spread greatly throughout the country, and for that reason, there was a great spread of the vegetarianism among the Chinese monastics. And these days in Tibet, there are some people who speak about this. And people who say there's no such tradition of this vegetarianism in Tibet. This is something that came from China, they say. It's an influence of Chinese Buddhism, they say. And likewise, even within Chinese Buddhism, giving up meat was an order of a Chinese emperor. But really, it's not actually such a simple issue, because the emperor himself, the Chinese emperor himself, as I said before, didn't prohibit eating meat because of being emperor. He said he said these sutras say this. He shared the quotations from the sutras, and when he said that, then once he showed that if we are Mahayana, then to say that's not so, then that's different. If you accept the Mahayana sutras, it's difficult to say that it's not so. And so for that reason, that is something that we need to keep this in mind. Likewise, in Tibet, the tradition of practicing vegetarianism is not something that is new. It's actually very clear that this has been practiced from the past. Generally in Tibet, because of the geography, it's difficult to give up meat. It's extremely difficult. And at such a high elevation in Tibet, since they had no technological advances, it was difficult to grow vegetables. Even if you planted them, they wouldn't grow. And so for this reason, from the old times, the practice of eating meat that was pure in the three ways was the primary practice. However, later, after many generations, after many years had passed, then the rules became relaxed, and people started eating whatever meat they could get their hands on. And in Tibet, they would actually monasteries would order sentient beings to be slaughtered for their meat. Or some monasteries also had butcheries, slaughterhouses. If you're practicing according to the Vinaya, then there are many situations that are contradictory to the Vinaya and were inappropriate. So for that reason, that was a main reason that many sentient beings, great beings, gave up prohibited eating meat, because many people were acting against it. These included people such as Dobos Shurab Gyatsen, Ngorshin Kunga Sampo, Shapkar Tsotorandro, Nyalama Pema Jason Shadza Tashi Gyatsen, Buddhism Pama Gansen, Kado Chotor Pema Kunzang, and also in later times, when we came to India, Chadra Sangye Dorje, the 14th Dalai Lama, and likewise the Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok in Tibet. So many great beings have made a lot of movement towards eating vegetarianism, particularly in the 21st century now. Most of the sutras most of these monasteries in Tibet and outside have probably stopped serving meat in their communal kitchens. And I haven't actually researched this, but my guess is that is this. There are also many members of the Sangha who have given up meat. And there are also many vegetarian societies and vegetarian movements in Tibetan society. Now, of course, there are many people have different opinions here, but for both. So I think there are many issues that need to be researched on all the different angles of the issue. Particularly, some people say that because they're vegetarian, that because they are eat vegetarian, then they criticize people who are eating meat and so forth, and just disparaging and speaking badly about them. That's not good at all. Also, as there are meat eaters who say various things about vegetarians, and so, and I think that it's not good to speak badly about each other. And so, even though we're beginning to do, but we end up getting into disputes, and I think that's not good. As I said before, Devadatta's movement of not wanting to, of giving up meat, was that from, in terms of the conduct, was perhaps good, but because of his motivation, it became a non-dharmic action. For the same, similarly, when we practice vegetarianism, if our conduct is good but our motivation is not, then I think that actually there's a danger that our conduct and practice becomes similar to that of Devadatta. So it's really important that we be very careful about our motivations. So I think we will take a break here, and then when we come back, I will continue from here.